I opened my banking app after our family vacation and saw just $82. My entire savings, over $7,000, was gone. When I confronted my brother-in-law, he laughed, said I'd earn it back in a week. And the worst part? No one in the room looked surprised. Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is the story of how a cabin trip with my in-laws unraveled everything I thought I knew about loyalty, silence, and family. What would you do if your own family crossed a line you never thought they would? Let me know in the comments, because I learned the hard way. Sometimes walking away is the only way to come home to yourself. The hum of the refrigerator was the only thing filling the silence as I stood in my kitchen, arms still slightly sticky from the summer heat. The house hadn't changed, of course. Same beige counters, same cracked tile by the sink, same scent of lavender from the plug-in diffuser I forgot to turn off before our trip. But something in me had shifted. I felt heavier, or maybe just hollow. We had just gotten back from our annual Moore family vacation, this time to a lakeside cabin outside of Hendersonville. The kind of place with mismatched rocking chairs on the porch and a fire pit that smelled like years of marshmallows. It should have felt like a break, but all I felt was tired. I set the last duffel bag down and opened the fridge. Half a bottle of iced tea, leftover grilled chicken from last Thursday. I grabbed the chicken and popped it in the microwave, pressing the familiar reheat button, watching the seconds count down like a tired habit. While at Word, I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. The power bill was due, and I like to stay ahead of things. But the number that greeted me didn't make sense. $82.39. I blinked, thinking maybe the screen hadn't refreshed. I hit reload. The number stayed the same. That couldn't be right. Just before the trip, I had over $8,000 saved. It was a comfortable buffer, my emergency and generosity fund. I'd half-joked to Adam once. I sat down at the table, balancing the phone on one palm as my thumb scrolled through the transaction history. A charge from a grocery store I didn't recognize. Another from a gas station on Merriman Avenue. A couple of PayPal withdrawals I knew I hadn't made. My stomach turned. Adam walked by, heading toward the back bedroom where his gaming setup was. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Did you notice anything weird with our account?" He paused, only slightly. "Weird how?" "There's barely any money in there." He furrowed his brow, but it was the kind of frown that looked more like a placeholder. "Maybe a glitch? Check again." Then he disappeared down the hall. The microwave beeped, but I didn't move. My eyes were locked on one line in the bank app. A fuel charge from a station right down the street from Kyle's apartment. That alone wasn't definitive, but it tugged at something in me, a thread I didn't want to pull. I thought back to the night we grilled burgers on the cabin's deck. Kyle had lifted a can of beer and toasted in my direction. "Rach can cover the groceries," he'd said with a laugh. "She doesn't have kids or a mortgage." Everyone chuckled. Even Nancy, sipping her rosé and wearing that soft smile that never quite reached her eyes. I had smiled too, because that's what I always did. But the comment lingered, like the smell of charcoal on your clothes the next morning. I stood up, ignoring the food, and opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for exactly. Proof, reassurance, a mistake I'd made. I navigated to the security section of my bank's website and checked the recent logins. There it was, a device labeled Cabin Guest PC with a timestamp that matched the third day of the trip. The IP address looked familiar. My heart sank lower in my chest. I had only used the cabin's shared computer once to check my email and confirm a delivery. It didn't occur to me to log out, assuming no one else would go poking around, but someone had. The folder of receipts I kept in a drawer by the fridge suddenly seemed vital. I pulled it out and flipped through pages. Everything felt like a blur. How had this happened? More importantly, why hadn't I noticed sooner? The quiet of the house pressed in. Adam wasn't asking questions. There was no concern in his voice, no urgency in his step. It was as if he trusted that I'd figure it out, like I always did. The same way Nancy trusted I'd pay for her new glasses when insurance didn't cover the brand she liked. the same way Kyle forgot to Venmo me back for last year's emergency rent check, the same way I stepped in quietly, always, because it felt easier than saying no. The microwave beeped again. The food was cold. I stared at the bank app, one finger hovering over the Report Fraud button. But something stopped me. Not fear, not indecision. It was the deep, hollow ache of betrayal. I wasn't ready to report yet. First, I needed to know. I needed to see it in their faces. I grabbed my keys and my purse. No jacket. It was still warm outside, that stubborn Carolina heat, clinging even after sunset. I didn't say anything to Adam. He was probably still in the back room, headset on, shooting virtual enemies or building a digital fortress. The door clicked shut behind me. As I pulled out of the driveway, the city lights blurred slightly in my peripheral vision. I wasn't crying, not yet, but the air felt thick. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The engine hummed as I turned onto the main road, heading toward Nancy and Ronald's house. I didn't know what I'd say when I got there, but I knew I wouldn't smile this time. The scent of pot roast hit me the moment I stepped through the door. Warm, familiar. It should have been comforting. Instead, it turned my stomach. Nancy peeked around the corner from the kitchen, her face lighting up with practiced ease. "Rachel, sweetheart, what are you doing back so soon? Didn't you just get home?" I didn't answer her question. I didn't smile. I just nodded and took off my shoes in the entryway like I always did, setting them neatly on the rug. My hands were cold even though the air outside had been thick with late summer humidity. Kyle was on the living room couch, shoes kicked off, legs sprawled like he owned the place. He was halfway through a beer and flipping through channels, even though the TV was muted. When he saw me, he grinned like we were old friends sharing a private joke. "You left it open," he said casually, before I even had the chance to speak. "I figured you wouldn't mind." The room stilled, but no one looked shocked. That was the first thing I noticed. "You figured I wouldn't mind?" I repeated, my voice too steady to be natural. Kyle leaned back and shrugged. "You always help. I just thought, it's family. You'd get it." Nancy walked in with a dish towel in her hands. She started wiping a clean counter, eyes carefully averted. "He didn't mean any harm, Rachel. He was just trying to keep up with everything. It's been a rough year." I stared at her. "He took over $7,000, Nancy. I wasn't ready to report yet. First, I needed to know. I needed to see it in their faces. I grabbed my keys and my purse. No jacket. It was still warm outside. That stubborn Carolina heat, clinging even after sunset. I didn't say anything to Adam. He was probably still in the back room, headset on, shooting virtual enemies or building a digital fortress. The door clicked shut behind me. As I pulled out of the driveway, the city lights blurred slightly in my peripheral vision. I wasn't crying, not yet, but the air felt thick. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The engine hummed as I turned onto the main road, heading toward Nancy and Ronald's house. I didn't know what I'd say when I got there, but I knew I wouldn't smile this time. The scent of pot roast hit me the moment I stepped through the door. Warm, familiar. It should have been comforting. Instead, it turned my stomach. Nancy peeked around the corner from the kitchen, her face lighting up with practiced ease. "Rachel, sweetheart, what are you doing back so soon? Didn't you just get home?" I didn't answer her question. I didn't smile. I just nodded and took off my shoes in the entryway like I always did, setting them neatly on the rug. My hands were cold even though the air outside had been thick with late summer humidity. Kyle was on the living room couch, shoes kicked off, legs sprawled like he owned the place. He was halfway through a beer and flipping through channels, even though the TV was muted. When he saw me, he grinned like we were old friends sharing a private joke. "You left it open," he said casually, before I even had the chance to speak. "I figured you wouldn't mind." The room stilled, but no one looked shocked. That was the first thing I noticed. "You figured I wouldn't mind," I repeated, my voice too steady to be natural. Kyle leaned back and shrugged. "You always help. I just thought, it's family. You'd get it." Nancy walked in with a dish towel in her hands. She started wiping a clean counter, eyes carefully averted. "He didn't mean any harm, Rachel. He was just trying to keep up with everything. It's been a rough year." I stared at her. "He took over $7,000, Nancy." She winced slightly, but only for a second. "We didn't spend it on anything frivolous, if that's what you're thinking. Groceries, gas, Haley's school shoes." Kyle raised his bottle. "You're the one who always says you don't need much. I figured, well, you'd bounce back faster than we would." I sat down on the edge of the armchair across from him, more to keep my knees from buckling than anything else. There were family photos lined up neatly on the mantel, wedding portraits, baby pictures, school graduations. I wasn't in most of them. It had never really bothered me before. Now it felt like a confirmation of something I hadn't wanted to believe. Nancy went back to the kitchen, her voice trailing from around the corner. "You're such a blessing to this family, Rachel. You've always been so stable, so giving." It wasn't a compliment. Not anymore. Ronald sat in his usual spot by the window, newspaper folded neatly on his lap. He didn't speak, just stirred his coffee, twice slowly before setting the spoon down and getting up. He left the room without a word. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping for anything, anyone. It was Adam. I answered. "Hey," he said, casual as if we were talking about dinner plans. "Nancy called. She said you seemed upset." I glanced at Kyle, who had just turned the TV volume up a few notches. "She's not wrong." "Look," Adam continued, "I know this isn't great, but don't make it a big deal, okay? We can figure it out." "Don't make it a big deal?" I said, quieter than I meant to. "I mean," he added quickly, "they didn't mean it like theft or anything. It's just, you always help. Maybe you forgot to log out or something." I ended the call. I didn't say goodbye. Kyle chuckled from the couch. "Come on, Rach, you'll earn it back in a week. Why are you being so dramatic?" I stood up slowly, my palms clammy. "You know what hurts the most?" I said, looking directly at him. "It's not even that you took it. It's that no one thought to ask." No one replied. Nancy came back in with a bowl of salad, as if nothing had happened. "Stay for dinner. The roast is nearly ready." I stepped back. "I can't." Kyle raised an eyebrow. Still mad. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone again and opened my messages. My fingers moved almost on their own. "Rachel, do you still have that software that traces account logins?" I hit send. Becca would understand. She always had. I turned to leave, and as I walked out the door, Nancy called after me, "We love you, Rachel." Don't let one misunderstanding ruin everything. I paused just long enough to look over my shoulder. "It's not a misunderstanding," I said quietly. "It's a pattern." Then I stepped outside. The porch creaked beneath my feet. The air smelled of rosemary and roast and something else, something sour I couldn't quite name. The sky was turning the color of bruised fruit, heavy with the kind of silence that settles in when you finally stop hoping someone will say what you need to hear. The storm started as a low murmur in the distance, just a roll of thunder far enough away that it could be mistaken for a passing truck. But I knew better. I'd lived in Asheville long enough to recognize when the air thickened like that, heavy with waiting. Becca arrived just after 6. She didn't even knock, just opened the door with her usual quiet confidence and walked straight in like she had a purpose. She held a small hard drive in one hand and a manila folder in the other. "This wasn't accidental," she said without preamble. I didn't need her to soften it. I appreciated that about Becca. She didn't waste time with false comfort. We sat in my home office, the little converted second bedroom with a mismatched chair and desk I'd found on Craigslist. A steaming mug of ginger tea sat untouched beside my laptop. I had made it earlier, more out of habit than need, but the sharp scent now cut through the stillness like truth. Becca plugged the drive into my laptop and pulled up a screen I couldn't entirely follow. Lines of timestamps, IP addresses, device names, but she translated everything for me, slow and steady. "See this?" she said, pointing to one line. "This log shows that the device used to access your account was labeled Cabin Guest PC. That matches the computer at the lake house. It connected to your account on Friday evening and again Sunday morning before checkout." I nodded, heart already sinking. She tapped again. "And here's the kicker. There's a keylogger installed on that machine. It's basic, old school, but it captured entries made by users. That's how Kyle got your password. He didn't just happen to see your account open." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. I only used that computer once, to check a delivery confirmation email. Becca gave me a pointed look. "And that's all it takes." Outside, the first drops of rain began to tap against the window, slow, measured, like the ticking of a clock I hadn't noticed until now. "I remember," I said after a moment. "Kyle used that computer too. He said he needed to print something. Boarding passes or directions, I think." Becca nodded. "He probably installed the software then. It only takes a few minutes. He knew what he was doing." I stared at the screen, watching her cursor highlight sections in red. "What now?" I asked, though I already knew. She exhaled. "I've compiled everything into a PDF. Logins, timestamps, device IDs, access locations. I added a section explaining how keyloggers work and what it means from a legal standpoint." I looked at her. "You wrote all that?" She smiled faintly. "You taught me how to do this when I got fished 2 years ago, remember? You sat with me for hours. You told me not to panic, to get everything in writing, to breathe." I did remember. It had felt like the most natural thing in the world then. Helping Becca came without resentment, without hesitation. Becca placed the manila folder on the desk between us. "Now it's your turn to breathe." I opened the folder. Inside, everything was laid out clean and clear. No emotion, just facts. I stared at it. The weight of every transaction, every stolen moment compressed into neatly typed lines. "This is fraud," Becca said quietly, firmly. "This isn't a misunderstanding. He planned it." The words settled into me like the first drop of rain soaking into dry soil, not because I didn't already know, but because someone else had said it aloud. I'd been carrying the weight of doubt, wondering if I was overreacting, if I'd somehow brought this on myself. But now, sitting in that room with thunder rumbling and hard evidence on the screen in front of me, I felt the doubt shift. It no longer belonged to me. I closed the folder slowly, my fingers resting on the edge like it was something sacred. "I'm not letting this go," I whispered. "Not this time." Becca didn't smile. She didn't need to. She simply stood up and began packing away her things. Outside, the rain grew louder, each drop a quiet drumbeat of resolve. Inside, the silence was different now. It wasn't lonely. It was deliberate. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled every folder out of the hallway cabinet, the one Adam always said we should clean out someday. Old receipts, paper bank statements, emails printed in a hurry. I laid them out across the living room floor like puzzle pieces, each one a fragment of a truth I had stopped trying to remember. The soft glow of the desk lamp lit up the small space of my home office. It was late fall, and the heat had clicked on twice already that week. Outside, the leaves were mostly gone, the branches bare. Inside, my coffee had gone cold, but I kept sipping it anyway. In one open notebook, I began building a timeline. Every favor, every, "Can you help just this once?" From 2017 to 2021, the list grew longer than I expected. $40 for gas, $200 for Haley's camp deposit, $900 for Kyle's car repairs, the day before I was supposed to fly to Denver for a company retreat. I'd canceled the flight, told my manager something vague about a scheduling conflict. Kyle had said thank you once, maybe. I couldn't remember anymore. I color-coded the expenses with highlighters, green for groceries, blue for rent, orange for utilities. The MISC column was the longest. No explanations, just Venmo requests or quick texts that read, "Can you cover this?" And me always replying with, Of course. A different person lived in those old emails. Someone softer, someone hopeful. Now, the Rachel sitting on the floor at 3:17 a.m. was sharper, tired, but not broken. I saved everything into a single PDF file, over 50 pages, clean, labeled, chronological. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back against the wall, the hum of the fridge barely audible in the quiet. Becca called mid-morning. "How are you holding up?" "Focused," I said, and it was the truth. She didn't press, just said, "You need anything, I'm around." I thanked her and hung up. The silence returned, and I welcomed it. Adam came into the room a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes and yawning. He stopped when he saw the stacks of paper, the highlighters, the careful order of what must have looked like chaos. "What are you doing?" he asked, the question more confused than concerned. "I'm documenting." He frowned. "Why? This is all old stuff." I looked up from the floor. "Because you all buried it. I'm just digging it up." He didn't respond. After a moment, he turned around and left the room. The sound of the shower running echoed down the hall. I sat there for a while, just breathing, the kind of slow, steady breath that keeps your hands from shaking when you hit send. At 11:43 a.m., I emailed the Financial Crime Unit at the county office. Attached the file. Subject line, "Unauthorized access, personal banking documentation." Their reply came 48 hours later. "We've received your documentation. Please prepare to submit formal complaint paperwork." I stared at that one sentence like it was a doorway, one I had built brick by brick in the dark, and now someone on the other side had opened it. That evening, my phone buzzed. Nancy's name appeared on the screen. I didn't answer. A few seconds later, her voicemail came through. "Rachel, we heard about what you're doing. You don't have to take it this far. You've always been part of this family. Don't break it over a misunderstanding. Please, sweetheart, call me back." I sat perfectly still, the same way I used to when I was a little girl and didn't want to be found during hide and seek. If I didn't move, if I didn't breathe, maybe the ache wouldn't find me either. But I wasn't hiding anymore. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. Then I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "I'm not the one who broke it." Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The world kept spinning, unaware that something irreversible had shifted inside this little townhouse on a quiet street in Asheville. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the one holding everything together. I felt like someone who had finally let go. Thanksgiving came and went without a single word. No group text about what side dishes to bring. No email with the address for dinner. No call from Nancy, asking if I'd bake that sweet potato casserole she liked so much. At first, I thought maybe they assumed I wouldn't come, and then I realized they didn't want me to. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. The silence was the kind that didn't shout, didn't accuse. It just hovered, heavy, present. More unsettling than yelling because it left so much room for wondering. Adam went without me. He didn't argue. He just said, "They asked about you." When he came home, his voice low as if he were passing on weather updates. I didn't ask what he said in return. December crept in with soft frost on the windows and wreaths on every neighbor's door. I passed them each morning on my walk, gloved hands tucked deep in my coat pockets, breath fogging in front of me like whispers. The houses glowed with cheer, but I felt like I was on the outside of a snow globe, watching, untouched. I still showed up at work, still folded laundry, still watered the plants, but something inside had gone still, not empty, just quieter. Nancy's voicemails trickled in around Christmas. I didn't listen to them. I deleted them before they finished downloading. Kyle tried once, sent a text that read, "You mad forever?" I didn't reply. Adam stopped mentioning them altogether. Instead, he started moving around me like furniture, present, but without engagement. We still shared meals, but the conversations grew shorter. He didn't ask how I was doing. I stopped offering. Eventually, we just moved through the house like two people who rented the same space but didn't speak the same language anymore. I thought about something Nancy had told me years ago, when Kyle forgot to pick up Haley from school and I had dropped everything to help. "We don't air problems outside the family," she'd said with that signature smile. "Family handles things privately." And at the time, I nodded. I agreed. But now I sat at the kitchen table staring at the soft blue morning light against the cabinets, and I asked myself quietly, what if the problem is inside the family? What then? One Tuesday in early January, I got home to find a small envelope slipped through the door. No return address. My name written in shaky cursive. I opened it standing by the coat rack, fingers still red from the cold. Inside was a single note, handwritten on lined paper. "You don't know me, but I saw your story on a small blog. I did the same thing, and I survived. I thought you should know." There was no name, no contact, just that. The handwriting wavered in places, like whoever wrote it had stopped and started again, unsure. I read it 3 times. Then I walked into the home office, pushed a few bills and mail aside, and pinned the letter above my desk. Not as proof, as reminder. Later that night, Adam stood in the doorway of the office while I was reading through a few work emails. "You've changed," he said. I didn't look up. "Yeah." "You're not the woman I married?" That made me pause. I turned to face him. "Number, I'm the same woman. You just never really looked." He didn't reply, just exhaled like he had run out of things to say. Or maybe he realized I wasn't going to fill in the silence for him anymore. I sat alone in that office for a long time after he left. The hum of the heater kicked in. The wind tapped softly against the windows. I opened my laptop and typed into the browser, Boone, North Carolina, apartments, month-to-month lease. The search results appeared. Some studios with mountain views, a converted attic apartment above a bookstore, a quiet space with wood floors and a porch swing. I wasn't ready to call or schedule anything, but the act of looking felt like oxygen. The silence around me no longer felt like punishment. It felt like a pause, like the first breath before a new sentence begins. The mountains weren't loud, but they felt strong, like they'd been holding stories for centuries, and they had room for mine, too. Boone was still cool in early spring, the kind of air that made you want to breathe a little deeper. The wind smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke, and sometimes, if I left the windows open, I could hear birdsong mixing with distant guitar notes from someone's back porch. My studio apartment was small, but the light made it feel bigger. Morning sun spilled across the wood floors, catching on the edge of my woven rug and the vase of wildflowers I picked up from the Saturday farmer's market. There wasn't much here, just enough. A bed, a desk, a shelf of books, no clutter, no noise. Some mornings I hiked the trail just outside of town, sipping tea from a thermos and stopping to watch the fog lift off the valley. Other days, I sat at the corner table in the local cafe, laptop open, listening to folk music hum beneath the clink of mugs and low conversation. The owner always remembered my name. The barista once tucked an extra cookie in my bag without saying a word. That kind of kindness, quiet and unasked for, felt more powerful than any apology I never got. Once a week, I updated my blog. Nothing fancy, just reflections. Thoughts I had while walking or reading or folding laundry. One post in particular seemed to land deeper than the others. I titled it, "You Are Not Selfish for Wanting Peace." I didn't expect much, but something about it spread. A few days after posting, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. Maya. She wrote, "My sister used to drain my savings too. Always said I was the lucky one. But reading your story gave me the courage to leave. You made me feel less alone. Thank you." I read it twice, then again. It wasn't long or dramatic, just real, and that made it enough. Later that evening, I video called Becca. She picked up immediately, her background blurred as usual, but her smile was crisp and real. "Look at you," she said. "You look untangled." I laughed and tucked my knees under me on the couch. "I feel like me again." She nodded. "You sound lighter." I tilted the laptop so she could see the view behind me, the mountains stretching beyond the edge of the porch. "It's not perfect," I said, "but it's quiet, and I think that's what I needed all along." After we hung up, I closed my laptop and made a cup of tea. Honey and lemon. Simple. The kind of thing I used to make for others and now made for myself without guilt. That weekend, I walked into a coffee shop I had visited years ago during a business trip when I barely had time to sit still. Back then, I had stood at the counter, jittery from emails and deadlines. Now I moved slowly, calmly, with intention. The same shopkeeper from years ago recognized me faintly. "You asked about the jazz track we played that day," he said. "I did," I replied, "and I remembered the peace I felt here." I ordered a chai and slipped a small envelope across the counter. It was addressed in neat handwriting, "To the next woman who needs to leave." He didn't ask what it was, just nodded and tucked it beside the tip jar. I walked out with my drink, the bell above the door ringing once, soft as wind chimes. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote, "This door didn't slam. I built it, locked it, and walked through." There were no fireworks, no applause, just the quiet pulse of freedom in my chest and the slow, steady beat of a life finally mine. I used to think peace had to be earned, after enough struggle, enough sacrifice. But now I know. Peace begins the moment you stop explaining your worth to people who never asked how you were holding up. Somewhere out there, another woman might read my words and take her first step. And if she does, I hope she knows she's not alone. The mountains didn't cheer when I walked through that final door, but they stood steady, like they knew I had made room for my own story at last. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't choosing yourself, it's accepting that those who love you may not understand why. But peace is not something we wait to be given. It's something we claim with quiet courage and a gentle, steady hand. If you've ever carried more than your share or stayed quiet so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable, I hope you know this. You're allowed to put the weight down. And if this story spoke to a part of your journey, feel free to share your thoughts. You never know who might be waiting for a sign that it's okay to begin again.